Hey guys, David Robinson here. Welcome to the Apartment Investing Journey. We've got a great guest for you today. We've been looking for guests that maybe bring a unique perspective, maybe that are outside of our niche industry and would be able to add some value to you in other aspects of your business rather than just strictly finding multifamily property to invest in. And so today I'm excited to bring Laura Adams on the show with us. Laura, thanks for joining us and appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be with you.
Yeah. So Laura is one of the nation's leading finance, insurance, and small business authorities. As an award-winning author, spokesperson, and host of the top-rated Money Girl podcast since 2008, millions of readers, listeners, and loyal fans benefit from her practical advice. Laura is a trusted source for national media who frequently seek her practical advice on various finance topics for TV, radio, online articles, and print publications. She's been featured on most major news outlets, including ABC, Bloomberg, CBS, Consumer Reports, the list goes on and on. So you have quite a track record of being in the media and sharing your insights and knowledge and experience as it relates to small business and financial matters. And so I do want to dive into that. I think you'll have a lot to share with our listeners, but we're also all about the journey on our podcast. And so what I'd like to do is maybe back up a little bit and let's just hear your story and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. So I have been down definitely probably a unique journey to get where I am. I didn't start out wanting to be a personal finance expert or even a writer, but I was always very interested in money as a kid. I was one of those teenagers that was begging mom and dad for my own bank account, and I wanted a checkbook, and I really wanted to manage my own money. And so I was always seeking just good information and just always reading about money. And so that was something that I was just kind of naturally drawn to, loved numbers, was good in math, and just really felt like, that was the strength of mine. But it wasn't until I got out of school, worked a little bit in jobs like accounting, and realized, no, that's not the direction that I want to go in. I found those jobs, certainly challenging, but not creative enough, I think. And so I went back to school, got an MBA, and that is when I got this spark for personal finances. And I really went into graduate school with no idea of how I would use it, what I wanted to do. And what I found is that there were a lot of very educated, smart people in my program who were even C-level executives in their company, but they were struggling personally with their money. They were deep in debt. They were really not on a good path. And I think a lot of them felt like, okay, if I just keep going to school and something will happen and it'll pan out for me. And, I don't know if school is always the answer, but for some people, it certainly can be. But they were deep into debt, were struggling with their personal finances. And kind of a light bulb went off in my head. And I realized that you can be very smart, very educated, even doing very well in your career, and still struggle with money and not have your ducks in a row and really not think through all of the different aspects of personal finances that keep you safe. So we had one personal finance class in my program, which is literally the only personal finance class that I ever had in high school or college, which that's a shame. That's a whole other, topic of financial literacy that we're struggling with in this country. But that one class is what made me realize that I was super interested in this stuff. And I did everything for the class and was very willing to participate. And it was like nobody else had any interest in this class. So all of that made me want to really get into the field and do what I could to help other people. I wanted to turn complex topics into simple concepts, simple ideas. And for me, that started out doing some blogging and podcasting in 2006. And I started podcasting in 2007 and then got invited to join the Quick and Dirty Tips podcast network to do Money Girl starting in 2008. So that's how the podcasting started for me. And I've been doing it weekly ever since. It's owned, the Quick and Dirty Tips Network is owned by Macmillan, which is a very large book publishing company. So that led to a lot of book opportunities and doing book deals. Book deals led to doing PR, marketing, trying to really get the word out for the book. And in doing media, that's where I realized that was something I really enjoyed. So my career kind of took a branch there, and I started working with large brands and companies to help them do media and really consult with them on PR. And so that's really what I do today, is work with big brands. And I still do the Money Girl podcast. That's something that I still love doing. But I like being able to address consumers and helping them understand complex topics, making it simple, and hopefully helping them make better decisions.
Love it. Well, that's a great journey that you've been on for quite some time now. And what's interesting is, 2008, starting the podcast. I mean, that's exciting in and of itself. You were on the forefront of this whole podcast world exploding over the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years. So good on you, and consistently for, that long. A weekly podcast. Congratulations. There's a couple of different paths that I want to take our conversation. The first is this concept of complex topics and breaking those down into simple ideas. And I'm wondering if, in your experience, well, let me break it down this way. A lot of our listeners are small business owners. They're investors, and they're usually solo entrepreneurs. Maybe they have a partner or two, but for the most part, the people that are listening to our podcast are those that are running their own businesses. And so I'm curious what advice you would have to share, or maybe some basic frameworks that you could break down for someone who's just getting started on their investing journey and looking to structure their business in a way that will set them forward on sound financial footing. Are there any frameworks, basic guidelines that you see over and over and over again over the years that could be helpful to them?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. So I have been a business owner. I have been one with employees, one as a solopreneur, as I am now. I've done both a W-2 job and done side gig in real estate and other work simultaneously. And so I have seen kind of all angles of business. And I get a lot of questions from podcast listeners about starting. They've either jumped in and didn't do a whole lot of preparation and now are trying to kind of backpedal because they maybe made some errors. Maybe they didn't put away money for taxes. They've, kind of made a few mistakes the first year and they're trying to correct. Or I see people who are so worried about, should I do this? Do I need that? Do I need a license? All these questions kind of hold them back from starting a business. And they are really, it's almost like just this fear, this paralysis by analysis. They cannot kind of move forward because they're just afraid they're going to miss something. So I think it's good to be kind of right in the middle, have preparation, but also be willing to take some risks, be willing to try some new things. So whatever your business is, whether it's starting out as a real estate investor, or maybe, you're just looking to make a little side income, maybe you've got money and you want to be a silent partner. Maybe you've got management expertise and you want to actually get in and do the day-to-day. Whatever it is, there are definitely a couple of things that I will advise people. The first is make a little money first before you do a lot of expensive preparation. So what I mean by that is maybe you want to get out there and make sure that you've got the potential to make money in what you're thinking about doing. Once you earn about $10,000 in whatever your side gig is, that's kind of the threshold where I tell people you really need to start getting organized. You need to start getting advice. If you haven't already, gotten advice about, let's say, incorporating or forming an LLC. And I would say with real estate, this is probably something you need to do right up front, because you've got more liability, perhaps, than, let's say, being a freelance writer or doing something with low liability. But really thinking through, how am I structuring things? Do I have my business and my personal banking separated? Am I truly looking at reporting for my revenue and expenses, thinking through? And as real estate investors, your audience is probably much more analytical and used to really looking at the numbers and, analyzing deals before jumping in, which is, maybe not so typical for many small-time solopreneurs who are really just figuring out, how do I read a financial statement? How do I think about profitability? So, getting a little bit of help up front, may cost some money, but it is typically worth it. And definitely once you get to that $10,000 level, that's when you need to make sure that you've got the right insurance. You're looking at your corporate structure. You're looking at your business banking, and really thinking through also, what are the worst case scenarios? So let's say you're with a partner, you're working together. What happens if one of you passes away? Maybe you need key man life insurance to replace that partner's expertise or their contribution to the partnership. Thinking about what are the worst case scenarios. It's never fun to do that. And all of these things are probably not likely to happen. But that's why we have insurance. It's to really protect you from all of those unexpected things that could happen down the road. I would say those are a few of the things, kind of cover yourself, protect yourself, things to get started. But also some advice I would give is really thinking about how to transition. If you're doing a day job and working real estate on the side, maybe you're trying to transition into it full time, and getting creative about how could you do that? Maybe I give an example in my recent book, Money Smart Solopreneur, about when I started doing the work that I'm doing now. I went to my employer. I was working as a COO of a small floor covering company, and I went to the owner, and we were getting into the recession of 2007, 2008. And, his company was really struggling. I knew he probably wasn't going to be able to afford me much longer. And I made kind of a negotiation with him that I would cut back to 4 days a week for a period. And then I would cut back to 3 days a week. That allowed him to be able to afford me. It allowed me to maintain some revenue and to get more time to work on my side business, which is what, I was really needing, because I was working a lot on the weekends and in the evenings. So that's just an example of a way that you might be able to work out some situation where you can make a gradual transition into that side business while you're maybe saving money. You're beefing up that emergency fund so that if things don't go as planned, you're going to be okay financially.
Yeah, love it. Those are great tips. I'm curious, speaking again to the small business owner, and then I want to transition to maybe larger business and branding and PR. But on the small business side, are there any common mistakes as you're consulting with small business owners, people that are just getting started or in the infancy of growing their business? What are the most common mistakes that you see made among small business entrepreneurs?
The biggest one is not really understanding the fact that once you create self-employment income, you are a business owner, no matter what you call yourself, freelancer, contractor, entrepreneur. All of these things basically mean that you have income that is not coming from an employer. When that income comes to you, whether it is just net profit on a real estate deal, it's capital gains, you've got 1099 income perhaps from side work. All of that means that you are now responsible for that income and paying taxes on it in a different way than you have been paying taxes as an employee. We don't think a whole lot about the taxes that we're paying when it just sort of gets automatically withdrawn and deducted from our paychecks. at a W-2 job. But once you begin working for yourself, not only are you responsible for reporting that income, but it's a higher amount. Now, thank goodness we also get to offset that with tax deductions. So I would say the biggest mistake is really not understanding the taxation on the income side and how to reduce your tax liability by using the right tax deductions. So a typical solopreneur will work the first year, won't set aside any money for taxes. They don't even know what quarterly, payments are. They will get to tax time and be totally shocked that they owe a pretty big tax bill. Well, now in year 2, they're in a hole. They are in debt because now they've got to make up for all those taxes that they probably had to dig out of their savings account to pay. And so in year 2, they're really struggling to be profitable. So that's a very common mistake that I see. And I would say just not getting help from an accountant to really maximize your tax deductions. An accountant is going to pay for themselves for sure. I use a tax accountant every year. I wouldn't dream of doing my taxes myself. They pay for themselves because they're saving me money by finding deductions and making sure I'm maximizing those. So I would say the tax issue is definitely the biggest mistake.
Yeah. And speaking of, being prepared for the taxes, I agree that there's, in my profession as a broker, real estate broker, as well as a real estate investor, it's not uncommon to have new real estate agents enter the business and not prepare appropriately for the tax ramifications that they may incur in what in many cases is a lucrative profession. And so are there any practical strategies to help the new person who's maybe in fix and flip or buy and hold or brokerage to make sure that they are set up in a way where they aren't going to get into year 2 and find themselves in a big hole?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say read my book, Money Smart Solopreneur.
Great.
It's a personal finance system for freelancers, entrepreneurs, and side hustlers, which as a real estate investor, that's what you are. You are an entrepreneur. So yes, definitely doing a little bit of homework, really just kind of understanding. You don't need to become an accountant, to prepare, but you just do need to understand the basics so that you know what your responsibility is. You know enough to ask the right questions. This is, common. We don't know what we don't know. And so if you're not asking your accountant the right questions, they may not be, fully helping you prepare. So yes, getting a little bit of help. I would also say using the right software is key. If you can use a good program, find something, I've always been a QuickBooks fan. There's QuickBooks for real estate. There's QuickBooks for, individual owners. And there is a feature there that will prompt you to pay quarterly taxes. Now, whether it's calculating what you truly owe correctly is another thing. It will try to annualize your revenue based on what you've put in so far. So it's only as good as the data that you put in. But it certainly can do a good job at prompting you at least to go, oh, yes, January 15, I'm going to owe last quarter's taxes, and sort of keep you on track. So finding the right software for you. And you might need to try out a couple different programs. Typically, the trials that you get are, free for a couple weeks. And that's a great opportunity to just kind of get in there and dig around. Also, if you have an accountant who uses a particular software, you may want to use the same one so that you can share files easily and that they can help you make changes or do journal entries or whatever you need to do within the software a little bit more seamlessly. Most accountants are very well versed with the whole QuickBooks Intuit suite of products, but there's so many more out there now. Wave and, people are using a variety of different programs that are also kind of like project management systems. Honeybook, there's a bunch of them. So I would say find out what is going to help you. What is easy? Does it mean using an app on the go? Is that going to make sure that you're set up correctly? Maybe you want to make sure that if you're driving a good bit, like most real estate people are, you keeping up with your mileage appropriately. A lot of the programs will either have their own automated mileage programs on an app that, if you've got the phone with you in the car, it's tracking where you're going. And then you can say, yes, that was a business trip, or, that was a personal trip. And so it will prompt you to maintain your mileage, because that's something a lot of people overlook when you kind of just jump in the car and go. And then you go, oh my gosh, I forgot what my starting mileage for the day was. If you're not keeping up with it, that can be really difficult to try to recreate, going backwards. So keeping up with mileage, having a mileage app that integrates with your software, that can also be a game changer.
Yeah, I love it. Those are great practical tips. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about some of our listeners run larger businesses. Maybe they're managing larger projects, involved in larger projects, multi-million-dollar projects, and they have more of an established business with consistent revenue that allows them to start to look at their marketing efforts and their branding efforts from a bigger perspective. You have a tremendous amount of experience in this world of PR and marketing and branding. And I'm curious, now granted, we have a limited amount of time to finish our conversation, and this could be a very lengthy topic, but are there any strategies that you've seen implemented in your world that have helped you to build a brand that reaches a significant amount of people and helps you to grow your business? What are some very practical strategies that you've been able to implement to help you grow your brand?
I do think this is an area where a lot of businesses are kind of missing the mark because they don't really see the potential. And there are definitely a couple of things that you can do. One, if you're willing to create consistent content, such as writing consistently, or even creating an audio podcast or a YouTube video channel, creating content consistently, what I have found that is the trick. And for a lot of people, they may not have the bandwidth or the time to do that. So I would say if you're not able to create content regularly, you may want to think about what you can do that would be, let's say, a one-time sort of pop that you could get a lot of attention from. So maybe that would be creating something like a survey within your industry, surveying business owners that are doing real estate, or even folks who are purchasing different types of properties, doing a survey and finding proprietary, unique data. Then you could contact local media with very interesting, unique information that they may want to share. It could be something about your local market or even your state. And I find that the media is very willing to feature companies and brands that bring them data that is unique and that is also educational. So you may be able to get featured on local news, radio, simply by reaching out to those folks with some interesting data. And in a lot of cases, it could even be a free or a low-cost survey that allows you to pull in that data and then kind of draw conclusions from it and figure out what's most interesting and include tips that would educate consumers or even B2B type of education. So, there are some different ways to approach it.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great suggestion. In fact, if we can take it another step deeper, let's say that someone has created that unique piece of content. They've done some research on a particular topic. This isn't just like the typical, blog post, but something a little bit more robust that would be valuable to a broad set of listeners. What would be the steps that someone would take to get in front of some of these larger, whether it be regional, local, or national broadcasters? What are the practical steps that someone would take to try to get that information out in front of people?
Yeah, you could likely hire a very low cost PR company, a small firm that would have particular software that allows them to create a media list. You might say, I want to target media in Orlando, or I want to target media all over the state of Florida. You can target it also by demographic. You could say, we want to reach a certain type of consumer. You might say, we want to reach the journalists that are only covering real estate. We want to cover the market that is maybe families and parents. So you can really kind of target down into the topics that a reporter is covering. And so they do that with software, different types of software that are fairly expensive. So it may not be something that you'd want to purchase on your own, but tapping into a freelance PR person, they could build that media list, help you create an outreach email, a press release to attach it, kind of dress it up and make it look great with a nice subject line, blast that out, and then they can field those requests for you. Also do follow-up emails to make sure that those emails are getting opened. They can even do A/B testing based on the subject line, just tweaking the subject a little bit and seeing if you get a better open rate with that. So there are definitely some tricks to the trade there. And if it's something that you as a larger business want to do internally, having those types of software programs in-house may be well worth it. And having a dedicated person who's kind of doing ongoing outreach for you may be worthwhile. And again, the content just, needs to live on your blog, on your website, so that you're driving traffic back to the place where you want either your B2B or B2C folks to come and see. And so make sure your website is, the way you want it before you begin driving traffic. So that's really the first step. You need to have good resources there, a good branding, a good presence. And then when you're really satisfied with it, then you want to start driving traffic to it.
Yeah, love it. Well, Laura, this has been a great conversation, and we've got to start winding down here, but I've got 3 final questions for you. The first is, what's the biggest mistake that you've made on your entrepreneurial personal branding journey that you've been on that we could all learn from?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I would say that I probably have not diversified enough. So many people said, Laura, you need to do video, you need to do this and that. And I think that, I'm an audio lover, and that's why podcasts have been so natural for me. And, I kind of wish that early on I had also gone into a YouTube channel and kind of, I guess, made the most of the content that I was creating and trying to. And so I would encourage all listeners to do that. Think about every way that you can use that content that you're creating. Could it be turned into an audio? Could it be turned into video, and vice versa? Could that video be transcribed and turned into a nice blog post? So really tweaking it and thinking through, and are you posting it on all your social media platforms? You don't need to recreate the wheel, but I think just sort of making that content, spreading it as wide as possible is something that is going to keep you efficient when you're creating content.
I love that tip. Next question I got for you. What's the biggest win you've had on your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I would say that it's really interesting that many of the folks that I worked with early on in my career, worked as just a W-2 worker, have stayed in my life. And as I turned freelance, those connections have all come back. And for many of them, they are now my customers, in my business. And so I would just say networking, maintaining relationships, those relationships have really all come back in very beneficial ways. And I hope likewise that I've helped those people as well, but never underestimate the power of the people that and really just staying in touch with them, I think, can be very powerful.
Last question for you. What's the best advice that you have for someone who's just starting their entrepreneurial journey?
One of the pieces of advice that has always stuck with me is if something is worth doing, it's worth doing today.
Mm.
So if you're thinking about, gosh, I should do this, and one day I'm going to be I'm going to be a great real estate investor. If it's truly worth doing in your mind, it is worth starting today. And that could be in a very small way, making just small steps toward that goal. So that has been, kind of a guiding principle for me that kind of motivates me and kind of points me in the right direction when I forget where my priorities are.
Well, Laura, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us a little bit about your own personal journey and then giving some practical guidance for those that are just starting their real estate investing businesses and some of the pitfalls that they need to try to think through before they get started, as well as some of the bigger branding techniques and consistent content and really leveraging that content to push out in multiple channels, as well as I love the tip about hiring a small PR firm to help you to expand that network and get that content out in front of a wider audience. Laura, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about you and what you have to offer?
Thank you, David. It's been so great to connect with you and be here. Anyone can follow me on Instagram at Laura D. Adams or my website, lauradadams.com.
Love it. So if you're listening, you want to connect with Laura, learn more about her or connect with her and her business somehow, click on the link in the show notes, lauradadams.com. Laura, again, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you sharing your journey with us and look forward to connecting with you again down the road.
Likewise. Take care.